The Civil War, one of the darkest times in American history, is best known as a brother versus brother war. The Civil War was fought by and against Americans. The war began when the southern states seceded from the Union because they wanted to keep slavery legal. The first shots were fired on April the 12th, 1861, and the final shot was fired on April 9th, 1865. The Confederate and Union each had their own president during the war. The loyal Unions chose Abraham Lincoln, and the rebels of the South followed Jefferson Davis. The Civil War was fought by farm boys, loyal volunteers, and experienced West Point graduates. Up to 2.75 million people fought in the Civil War, 2 million for the North and 750,000 for the South. Sadly, 620,000 soldiers gave their lives fighting for what they believed in by the end of the Civil War. President Lincoln issued his opinion on slavery by saying, "Whenever I hear anyone arguing for slavery, I feel a strong impulse to see it tried him personally." One of the saddest parts of the Civil War is that sometimes soldiers would fight their friends, neighbors, or in some cases, their own family. Today, when we look back into the dark times of the Civil War, most of us remember one thing. It was when brothers would fight each other on the battlefield and sometimes even kill each other. One example of this is the story of the King brothers from Lincoln County, Kentucky. Their story is told best by historian David Gambrill at the gravesite of Harb King and his teenage sons.
And I want to tell briefly about the story of brother against brother that involved Harb King and his brother John King, whom everybody called Jack. John King, or Jack King, actually joined the Confederate Army, and so then he instructed the men that he could help capture his brother. And so they went over to Turkey Creek and captured Harb King, his brothers, his Harb King's sons, teenage sons, and about a dozen other men from the Crab Orchard area. Now, and it's very hard to understand, there are no unbiased source documents that tell all this that happened. So you kind of have to read both sides and try to figure out the best you can. But from all I can tell is Harb King was placed in jail in Danville by this group of Confederates that Jack had joined. Another group of Confederates under Colonel Scott took them out of jail along with these 15 other men, and when they got to Laurel County, Ogden Bridgewater, who was about 6'3", over 200 pounds, who was one of the captured men, he was the older brother of Lieutenant James Bridgewater, managed to kill his guard and escape. And so I'm supposing when they got to the Cumberland River, they hang the teenage sons and about a dozen other young men from this area. They hung them while Captain King was forced to watch. This left a great division within the King family, obviously, but I'm happy to say that a few years ago, the descendants of Jack King and Harb King got together and had a very agreeable family reunion. And in fact, you see they have restored these stones that I have here, and they're actually dedicating a stone in 2020. They're having a dedication for, they found the tombstone of Harb King Sr. out at Preachersville, and they're going to erect a monument here in his memory. So the family, despite all that they endured and went through, prison and betrayal and murder, they are united today.
Some brothers do not have to be blood brothers, and a good example of this is at West Point Military Academy. Even though many West Point brothers had different opinions about the war, their brotherly bond held them together. How is this? It can be told best by historian Philip Seifert.
That is a really excellent question. We can take that up to today. Is that their friendship and their brotherly love for each other was stronger than their political views. They could agree to disagree, and they were still friends. They thought of each other more than they thought of their differences.
The war turned friends into enemies, but the brotherly bond survived. A good example of this can be found in the book The American Story, War Between Brothers. During one encounter, Thomas Tam Rosser rode out in full view of George Custer's men to reconnoiter, taunting Yankee sharpshooters by showing his cape's red lining. Custer ordered his men not to fire, and the next day dispatched a note to his classmate turned enemy. Tam, do not expose yourself so. Yesterday I could have killed you. Brothers fighting brothers in the Civil War is important because we have to remember how it affected our nation in the many ways that it did. The biggest way was it tore family and friendships apart. These brothers spent their free time together, but when war broke out, they betrayed each other in ways that no brothers should. The Civil War was a tragedy that will always be remembered. Men fought and gave their lives for what they thought was right. So now, today, when you look back into these dark days, it really was a brother versus brother war.